Hi, there's been a lot of controversy surrounding uh, religious conversions, right? Now, to be very clear, I have got no objection to adults converting out of their own free will. Like, for example, if the law of the land says that, marry a certain kind of person, you have to convert, then that's fine. That's your free will. Or some people may even convert because by converting, they may get some benefits, financial benefits, and things like that. So that's also free will. That's fine. The issue is when a young person gets converted due to insufficient information being given or the wrong information being given to them, right? So I'm doing the series on evidence-based religion. So basically what we are going to do is we are going to do a forensic audit using secular history tools on religious history. That means basically if someone tries to convert you, you are going to take a very clinical approach and break down their arguments, right? Now, you have to understand a bit of background before you can do your job. Hinduism is a strict monotheistic religion, right? There's only one God in this world, and we can call him by any name and we can worship him in any way. So, if you're in Iceland, you do it your style. If you're in Japan, you do it your style. Now, as Hindus, we do not try and convert others since it's illogical to convert people if you believe there's only one God, right? So we don't teach young Hindus comparative religion. So when you don't teach them comparative religion, they may find it very difficult to respond to hostile questions by people who are trying to convert them, right? So this toolkit is to challenge potential conversion attempts. Now, though we don't teach comparative religion in Hinduism to youngsters, but we do have a school of philosophy known as darsanas. It's meant for people who are of good intellect and logical thought process and reasoning. So we are going to use that model here. Now, before we start, a brief summary of Hinduism. Now, there are basically two parts to Hinduism. Of course, there are much more than that, but just the basic parts. One is the theology. What are the important concepts in Hinduism? And here you have got things like the cycle of birth and death and rebirth, the duties of a Hindu by the stage of life. This is the Varna Ashrama Dharma. The purpose of a Hindu's life. Why are we here? What's our purpose? And then worship in Hinduism, right? Now, the second part is actually the more difficult part because we have got this huge library of scriptures which is supposed to teach us to live righteously, okay, to live dharmically, right? Now, here we have the itihasas, basically historical accounts like the Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, and the Ramayana. Then we have got the Puranas. Puranas basically mean old stories, remembered stories, right? And then we have got what is known as the Dharma Sastras, Hindu laws. A good example is Manusmriti. Now, the first theological concept, the cycle of birth and death, whereby someone is born and then he tries to make sure that his actions are as righteous as possible. Sanatana Dharma, that's what he follows, Sanatana Dharma, so that his karma is, not too bad. And then when he dies, he hopes that his good karma will give him a good rebirth so that he can continue that cycle. Of course, eventually, the main aim is to attain moksha, which is that means there's no more rebirth and you're one with God. Now, this concept, usually they don't attack it because uh, there is medical and scientific evidence for reincarnation and rebirth. Okay, that you cannot, what shall I say, break that evidence easily. For example, the Division of Perceptual Studies in the University of Virginia School of Medicine, they've got a whole department dedicated to looking at rebirth and reincarnation. Now, if you want to read something written for lay people, you can look at the study in Psychology Today. It's known as Evaluating the Evidence for Reincarnation. That's basically a lay person's It's written by a PhD doctor, but it's meant for lay people. But there are a lot of medical articles on reincarnation as well. So this is a very ironclad philosophy. They don't go for this. They don't go for this either. Basically, the duties of a Hindu by stage of life, because this is sort of common sense thing. The purpose of a Hindu's life, sometimes some people they argue this because of their worldview is life is a miserable thing. Life on earth is miserable, and they are waiting for some what shall I say, a better life in another phase. An extra post-death phase or whatever they call it. But the life on this earth is miserable for them. But for Hindus, it's not like that. Life on this earth is supposed to be wonderful, and you are supposed to make the lives of others wonderful as well. So this may be not much of a controversial thing. The one where they really try and attack is worship. You see, Hinduism, because we are strict monotheists, uh, we say there's only one God, and this God is all powerful. So if God wants to take a different form, and he's all powerful, he can do it, right? So who are we to prevent God from taking any form he wants? God can come as a cat, a dog, a donkey, whatever he wants to. So that is our acknowledgement that God is all powerful. He can do anything, he can be anything, right? Now, as a Hindu, we don't have, we're not stuck with one form of worship. We have got many forms of worship. Some people like to learn scriptures. I'm like that. I like to learn, read scriptures and learn about the history of our yogis and rishis and all that. Some people like to meditate. Okay, basically they want to reach the plane of higher consciousness. Some people prefer doing a service. They do service for other people for a temple. But most people like bhakti yoga, where you pour your love out for God, right? And this is where those who have done comparative religion and who are trying to convert you, they try and embarrass Hindus. So they like to say that, oh, we have idol worship and we have many gods, as though be worshipping an idol is something undesirable, right? That is a very Anglo-Saxon way of looking at it, that idol worship is undesirable. Whereas, as far as the Hindu way of looking at it, idol worship is very desirable because it helps you focus your mind, especially when you're a young child. It helps you focus your mind on your prayers. So if they tell you that you worship idols, and then you've got so many idols, so you tell them, first of all, God is all powerful. It's not for you to say what form he can or cannot take. Number two, having an idol in front of you is very good for focusing the mind. Okay. Now, the difficult part is actually the library of Hindu scriptures we have, because very often either they don't understand the concept of Hindu literature, or they do and they just trying to be cheeky. Okay. Now, of course, we have our historical itihasas like the Mahabharata, Ramayana, Bhagavad Gita, and then what we call Puranas, the old stories, and the Dharma Shastras. Now, as Hindus, we have a certain understanding of this. Like we know that the Vedas and Agamas are kept unchanged, but they're mainly for the priests. Okay, there's no pressing reason for a lay person like me to want to go and study the Vedas, right? So most of us don't trouble ourselves about the Vedas, but the Puranic scriptures are meant for lay people, right? They are meant to teach lay people the principles of Sanatana Dharma. It's all story form. Something bad will happen, and then God will go and ask someone to fight the evil, and then good will happen, right? The only thing that changes is the type of bad. It can be killing, it can be stealing. So the type of crime changes. The characters will change, but eventually there'll be a solution to it. So there's a lesson to be learned, right? And because these are said to lay people, we have no problem if the Puranas are altered. It's like someone teaching you maths. They teach you in this using this method. If you cannot understand They don't stop teaching you. They just use a different method. So like that, the Puranas are like that. So we have no problem with variations. But for some reason, some religions, they consider that any variation in the scripture is proof that it is not divine in origin. Okay, I don't understand their logic, but because the whole purpose of scriptures is to teach people a righteous pathway. So I don't understand that logic, but anyway, let's just go with it, right? So point out to them that the whole purpose of Puranas is to change according to the situation, to make that particular audience understand the basic concept. Then we come to our Dharma Sastras. They like to pick on the Manusmriti and comment on it and criticize it. Now, first of all, we have to understand Hinduism has a living constitution. Our laws change with time, right? We don't take old laws and try and force it down a modern society, right? Like for example, in those days, people just looked at the moon; they don't fight over it, right? You couldn't even go to the moon, so there are no laws governing property rights on the moon. But now we have so many countries sitting in the moon, right? We have 4 countries. So now we have to come up with new laws governing extraterrestrial objects. So which religion has got laws which can govern property rights on the moon? We don't have, right? So we have to make new laws which are both equitable, sensible. So with Hinduism, we have no problem because we will come up with laws which are sensible because ours is a living constitution. So you can explain that to them as well. So now we come to the part where we use uh, forensic audit. We do a forensic audit on whatever story they tell you, right? They come and tell you, oh, we have. So I'm going to make a sample fake religion. Okay, I'm going to call it ism because like X. Recently Twitter changed its name to X, so I'm also going to use that. So this fake religion has got a founder by the name of Rishi Z. Okay, so don't try and guess who Z is. Now he was born in Tamil Nadu in India and in the year 400 AD, and he started preaching when he was in 430 AD, and he died by 450 AD. Okay, so roughly that's how a person will be. When they're mature, they start preaching. Now, as you can see, all that in black is objective. Okay, so you can dissect that, right? Now, certain things are subjective, like the character of Rishi Z is very subjective. The words that God conveyed through him, whether it is, what shall I say, very divine or holy, all that is very subjective sometimes. So do not criticize the character of Rishi Z or the message that God gave him. Okay, those are all very subjective. Put that aside. Only go for the objective facts which you can scientifically prove or disprove. Now, when it comes to records, you have to understand a few things. Records, just because a record is created doesn't mean it is a useful record. All right? It depends on who created the record, when it was created, how was it kept, the provenance of it, right? Do we know how this passed from hand to hand? Because someone could have forged something, and then that forged thing is the one that is passing from hand to hand, not the real thing, right? So you basically want to know if this Rishi Z was a preacher who was believed by the public during his time. That means he was a well-known person, he was influential person. There would have been many records about him created at that point in time. Somebody who went and attended his lecture would have made a stone engraving and said, oh, wonderful lecture by Rishi Z. He said this. Okay, so all this will be there, right? And in those days they did write in this kind of material as well. uh, you have to be very careful about records because sometimes people can create records. That means, let's say Rishi Z died in 450 and someone wanted to write some stories about him. They can write a story in 500 AD and claim that it was written in 450. So dating of old records is very important as well. So when you look at all these things, very often you find with religions, they don't actually have very good records. Okay, you have to take everything on belief, because if you start examining the dates and things like that very closely, things don't match up. Okay, and secondly, some records are copied over and over again, so things can be added or deleted. So you must ask all these questions. The other thing is the year of the event. Okay, like in Hinduism, we say that we don't know when the Vedas were created, right? As far as we know, there was no beginning, no end. It is timeless, and it is not, it's apurushaya. That means it's not authored by a man. It may have been realized by men. When the rishis do deep meditation, they do realize some divine, or rather, they have some divine inspiration, but they were not the authors of it. They didn't write it, right? Or they didn't invent it. So, and during that time, they may not have had a complete language or a complete script. So, uh, if you want to date something that old, it's going to be very difficult. And secondly, the thing with Vedas is, uh, it's not just the written word. If you look at them chanting the Vedas, you will see hand gestures and things like that. So that cannot be transmitted in writing. So you will find that it was just not recorded for many, many years. In fact, the recording is quite recent, right? But that is because it has got not just the words, it has got the hand gestures, and it went and it was transmitted by a specific class of people who are the priestly class, right? So that is a different thing. But if we are talking about something from 200 BC, let's say, right, then there should exist proper records created during the lifetime of the Shizi. Let's say he was in 400 AD, that is well after 200 BCE. There should be proper records. And if people will tell you, oh no, those days people couldn't write and this and that and all that, that's not a good reason. That's not a good argument, because in 250 BC we have records of a Greek ambassador known as Megasthenes, who came to India and wrote about Chandragupta Maurya, Emperor Chandragupta Maurya. So that means records do exist from that period as well. It's a matter of whether people want to create it and how well it has been kept. Okay, then the other thing is venue. Okay, now let's say Rishi Z was born in Tamil Nadu in the year, we are saying that he was born in the year 400. But there may be other records showing that that area was a jungle until the year 500 AD. Before that it was all a jungle. Then you'll be wondering, hey, but Rishi Z was supposed to have been born here, right? So you must have multiple corroboration. There must be maps dating back to that period and things like that. Because you must remember, very often kings have got this habit of trying to create religions, because they may have very restless population, or they want to control the population and things like that. So they will choose somebody who died 100 years ago. The person may have existed, but he was not somebody important, and say that Rishi Z said all these wonderful things, so now we are going to follow him and things like that. So you have to make sure that that their story is backed up by physical evidence. Of course, then the most problematic thing comes. Like you see, our rishis and all that, they go into deep meditation, and then they have this, they realize certain things. Okay, but our rishis, Hindu rishis, they don't care to tell you about it. Okay, they don't come and say that, oh, I realized this. No, it's not like that. They'll keep to themselves. If you go and ask them, then they will say, yeah, I had this realization. Okay, if it's helpful to you, then this is what I realized. The divine revelation. They are not looking for followers. They keep to themselves, right? If you happen to meet them, then you have to really, what shall I say, beg them to tell you things. But on the other hand, if somebody comes and makes a declaration, God spoke to me, or I got some divine revelation, then we need proof that God actually spoke to them. So, and we need very scientific, objective proof because they are making a declaration. It's not that we are going and looking for them and asking them, oh, you did this meditation. What did you find out? What did you find out? So this is totally a different thing. So it depends on Rishi Z. Was he doing his meditation and then people went and asked him, hey, what did you feel during the meditation? What did you see? Or is he coming and saying, okay, God spoke to me? So that what shall I say, difference is very important, right? So I hope with this you have got a sampling of what a critical inquiry into religious history looks like. Now what I've given you is actually something very basic, which within a few minutes you can extract the information from whoever is trying to convert you, and most of the time you'll find that they cannot answer you, right? Because these records simply don't exist. Even for Hinduism also, sometimes certain saints, we actually do not know when they existed and when it was thing was written. It's just that we have got all these rock carvings and what we call as kalbete and things like that. So it's something that has been carved in rock. All right. So if someone approaches you and tries to convert you, be critical of whatever information they give you. Right? Don't take it at face value. Thank you very much, and I will see you with another evidence-based video.